The grand hall of the Galactic Concord was a marvel of engineering, its towering arches and shimmering light panels a testament to the unity of countless species. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in concentric rings, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of holographic displays. At the center stood Admiral Cale Draven, a human, his uniform crisp and his voice steady as he addressed the assembly. The Void Swarm is not just a threat to humanity or the Concord. It is a threat to all life. We must act now or we will be consumed. The swarm had emerged from the uncharted depths of the galaxy, a ravenous force that devoured star systems with terrifying speed. Worlds fell silent, their populations erased in moments. The Concord had tried everything: plasma cannons, ion disruptors, even temporal weapons. Nothing worked. The swarm adapted, evolved, and continued its relentless advance. Humanity, though new to the galactic stage, had proposed a solution: the Aegis Protocol, a defensive network powered by quantum entanglement. It could theoretically disrupt the swarm's cohesion, rendering it vulnerable. The Council had been skeptical, but desperation had forced their hand. Admiral Draven's words echoed through the hall. The Aegis Protocol is our best hope. It is not perfect, but it is our only chance to stop the swarm before it reaches the core worlds. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Zorathians, a towering species with iridescent scales and cold, calculating eyes, exchanged glances. Their ambassador, Valen Kor, rose to speak. Admiral Draven, your proposal is ambitious, but humanity's track record is inconsistent. Can we truly trust you with such a responsibility? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Humanity had always been an outlier in the Concord. Physically weaker, technologically behind, they had earned their place through sheer determination and ingenuity. They were the underdogs, the ones who refused to back down. But their rise had not gone unnoticed. The Zorathians, long the dominant power in the Concord, viewed humanity as a threat. Their influence was growing, their ideas spreading. And now, with the Aegis Protocol, they had the potential to shift the balance of power. The vote was called. One by one, the representatives cast their ballots. The result was unanimous. The Aegis Protocol would be implemented. Humanity would lead the effort, with the full support of the Concord. Admiral Draven allowed himself a small smile. This was their moment. This was humanity's chance to prove themselves, to show that they were more than just survivors. They were leaders. But as the assembly adjourned, Valen Kor lingered, his expression unreadable. He watched as Draven and his team left the hall, their steps confident, their heads held high. And then he turned to his aides, his voice low and cold. Begin the contingency plan. Humanity cannot be allowed to succeed. The Aegis Protocol was a marvel of human engineering. It required the coordination of thousands of ships, each equipped with a quantum resonator capable of generating a localized disruption field. When activated in unison, the resonators would create a network of overlapping fields, effectively neutralizing the swarm's ability to coordinate its attacks. It was a bold plan, one that pushed the limits of technology and logistics. But humanity had always thrived under pressure. The deployment was flawless. The ships took their positions, the resonators humming with energy. Admiral Draven stood on the bridge of the flagship, his eyes fixed on the holographic display. The swarm was approaching, a dark cloud of destruction that blotted out the stars. All units, prepare to activate the Aegis Protocol on my mark, he said, his voice calm but firm. But as the countdown began, something went wrong. The resonators faltered, their energy signatures fluctuating wildly. The disruption fields collapsed, leaving the fleet vulnerable. The swarm surged forward, its tendrils reaching out to engulf the ships. Panic spread through the fleet as the swarm tore through their defenses. Admiral Draven's voice crackled over the comms. Fall back now. It was too late. The fleet was decimated, their ships reduced to burning husks. The Aegis Protocol had failed, and the swarm continued its advance. The Concord was in chaos. Accusations flew, fingers pointed, and then the truth emerged. The failure had been no accident. The Zorathians had sabotaged the Aegis Protocol, planting a virus in the system that caused the resonators to malfunction. They had betrayed humanity, sacrificing the fleet to protect their own interests. Admiral Draven stood before the council, his face a mask of fury. "You betrayed us," he said, his voice trembling with anger. "You sacrificed billions of lives to maintain your power. And for what? The swarm will consume us all." Valen Kor rose, his expression cold and unyielding. "Humanity was a liability. Your ambition threatened the stability of the Concord. This was a necessary sacrifice. The Council voted to exile humanity, casting them out of Concord. They were left to fend for themselves, their ships damaged, their resources depleted. As they drifted into the void, Admiral Draven made a grim discovery. The swarm was not a natural phenomenon. It was a weapon created by the Zarathians to eliminate their rivals. And now it was out of control. The galaxy's downfall had begun, and humanity, betrayed and broken, was the only one who could stop it. The swarm's advance was relentless, a tidal wave of destruction that consumed everything in its path. Star systems fell one after another, their light extinguished as the swarm devoured planets, stars, and even the fabric of space itself. The Concord defenses, once thought impenetrable, crumbled like sandcastles before a tsunami. Panic spread like wildfire across the galaxy, and the once unified council descended into chaos. Species turned on each other, desperate to save themselves. But their efforts were futile. The swarm was unstoppable. Humanity, now exiled to fringes of known space, watched in grim silence as their former allies were consumed. Their fleet, battered and broken, drifted aimlessly through the void. Supplies were running low, and morale was even lower. The betrayal by the Concord had cut deep, but humanity had no time to dwell on it. Survival was their only priority. Admiral Draven, his face etched with exhaustion, addressed the remnants of his crew. "We've been cast aside, but we are not defeated. We are humanity. We endure. We adapt, and we will find a way to fight back." The human colonies on the edge of the galaxy were ill-equipped to handle the influx of refugees. Food and water were rationed, and the air in the overcrowded habitats grew stale. Yet, despite the dire circumstances, humanity's spirit remained unbroken. Engineers worked tirelessly to repair damaged ships, while scientists scoured databases for any information that could help them understand the swarm. Among them was Dr. Elena Reyes, a brilliant but reclusive astrophysicist who had been working on a secret project even before the betrayal. Her lab, hidden deep within the colony's infrastructure, was a chaotic mess of holographic schematics and half-finished prototypes. But amidst the chaos, there was a spark of hope. Dr. Reyes had discovered something, a flaw in the swarm's design. It was not a perfect organism, as the Concord had believed. It had a weakness, a vulnerability that could be exploited. But to do so would require resources humanity no longer had. "We need to act now," she told Admiral Draven during a tense meeting. "If we can harness the remnants of the Aegis Protocol, we might be able to create a countermeasure, but it will require everything we have left." The Admiral hesitated. The Aegis Protocol had been their greatest failure, a symbol of their betrayal, but he knew they had no other choice. "Do it," he said finally. "Mobilize every resource we have. This is our last chance." Meanwhile, the Zarathians, the architect of the swarm, watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of satisfaction and unease. Their plan had worked too well. The swarm, designed to eliminate their rivals, had grown beyond their control. It no longer obeyed their commands, and its hunger was insatiable. Valen Kor, the Zarathian ambassador who had orchestrated humanity's betrayal, now found himself facing the consequences of his actions. "We must contain it," he told his council, his voice tinged with desperation. "If the swarm reaches our core worlds, all is lost." But containment was no longer an option. The swarm had evolved, adapting to every weapon and strategy thrown at it. The Zarathians' attempts to regain control only accelerated its growth. Their once mighty empire began to crumble as the swarm turned its attention to their worlds. The very weapon they had created to secure their dominance was now their undoing. Back on the human colony, Dr. Reyes and her team worked around the clock. The remnants of the Aegis Protocol were repurposed, their quantum resonators reconfigured to emit a new kind of signal, one that could disrupt the swarm's cohesion. It was a risky plan, one that had never been tested, but it was their only hope. "We're ready," Dr. Reyes announced, her voice steady despite the weight of what they were about to attempt. "But we'll need a ship to deliver the payload directly into the heart of the swarm." Admiral Draven nodded. "I'll lead the mission myself." The crew of the Eclipse, a battered but functional cruiser, volunteered for the mission. They knew the odds were against them, but they also knew what was at stake. As the ship prepared for launch, the colony gathered to watch. Families said their goodbyes, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. Admiral Draven stood at the helm, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "This is not just a mission to save humanity," he said. "This is a mission to save the galaxy. And if we fail, let it be said that we fought until the end." The Eclipse launched into the void, its engines burning bright against the darkness. The swarm loomed ahead, a vast and terrifying presence that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The crew braced themselves as the ship entered the swarm's outer reaches. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into an eternity. Dr. Reyes monitored the payload, her fingers flying across the controls. "We're in position," she said, activating the disruptor. The signal flared to life, a burst of energy that rippled through the swarm. For a moment, nothing happened, and then the swarm began to react. Its tendrils writhed and twisted, its cohesion faltering. But it was not enough. The swarm was too vast, too powerful. The Eclipse was engulfed, its hull buckling under the strain. Admiral Draven's voice crackled over the comms, his words barely audible over the chaos. "We need more power. Give it everything we've got." Dr. Reyes hesitated. Increasing the signal strength would overload the system, destroying the ship and everyone on board. But it was the only way. She looked at Admiral Draven, her eyes filled with resolve. "It's been an honor," she said. The signal surged, a blinding wave of energy that tore through the swarm. The Eclipse was consumed in the blast, its sacrifice echoing across the galaxy. And then silence. The swarm's advance halted, its tendrils dissolving into nothingness. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the nightmare was truly over. On the human colony, the survivors watched as the stars began to reappear, their light piercing the darkness. The swarm was gone, but so was the Eclipse, and the brave souls who had given their lives to save them all. Humanity had endured, but the cost had been unimaginable. And as the galaxy began to rebuild, one thing became clear. The betrayal had not broken humanity. It had forged them into something stronger, something capable of facing any challenge. The galaxy's downfall had been averted, but the fight was far from over. The aftermath of the Eclipse, as sacrifice, was a fragile calm, a brief respite in the storm that had engulfed the galaxy. The swarm's advance had been halted, its tendrils dissolving into nothingness. But the cost had been immense. The human colony, once a bustling hub of activity, was now a somber shadow of its former self. The loss of the Eclipse and its crew weighed heavily on everyone, but there was no time to grieve. The swarm had been weakened, not destroyed, and humanity knew it was only a matter of time before it returned. The fight was far from over. Admiral Draven's final words echoed in the minds of those who had survived. "We need more power. Give it everything we've got." Those words became a rallying cry, a reminder of the sacrifice that had bought them this chance. Dr. Elena Reyes, now the de facto leader of the scientific effort, gathered her team in the lab. The disruptor signal had worked, but it had only been a temporary solution. To truly defeat the swarm, they needed something more, a weapon that could not only neutralize it, but destroy it entirely. "We have to think bigger," she said, her voice firm despite the exhaustion etched into her face. "The swarm is a self-replicating entity. We need something that can outpace it, something that can adapt and evolve faster than it can." The answer lay in the remnants of the Aegis Protocol. The quantum resonators, though damaged, still held potential. Dr. Reyes proposed a radical idea. Repurpose the resonators to create a counter-swarm, a self-replicating nanite system that could infiltrate and dismantle the swarm from within. It was a dangerous plan, one that pushed the boundaries of science and ethics. But with the galaxy's survival at stake, there was no room for hesitation. "We'll call it the Phoenix Initiative," she said, "because from the ashes of our failure, we will rise." The colony mobilized, every available resource funneled into the project. Engineers worked around the clock to repair and modify the resonators, while scientists developed the nanite prototypes. The work was grueling, the stakes unimaginably high. But humanity's resilience shone through. They had been betrayed, cast aside, and left to die, but they refused to give up. The Phoenix Initiative was their chance to prove that they were more than just survivors. They were the galaxy's last hope. As the project neared completion, a new challenge emerged. The swarm, though weakened, was not idle. It had begun to adapt, its tendrils probing the edges of human space. The colony's defenses were stretched thin, and it was only a matter of time before the swarm broke through. Dr. Reyes knew they had to act fast. "We need to deploy the Phoenix Initiative before the swarm recovers," she told the Council of Survivors. "But it's a one-way mission. Whoever goes won't be coming back." The announcement was met with silence, then a wave of volunteers. Among them was Captain Marcus Hale, a seasoned pilot who had served under Admiral Draven. "I'll do it," he said without hesitation. "If it means saving the galaxy, I'll fly that mission." The preparations were swift but meticulous. The modified resonators were loaded onto a single ship, the Phoenix, along with the nanite payload. The crew was small, just enough to operate the ship and deploy the weapon. As they boarded, the colony gathered to watch, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. Dr. Reyes approached Captain Hale, her expression solemn. "This is it," she said. "The fate of the galaxy rests on your shoulders." Hale nodded, his gaze steady. "We'll get it done. For Draven. For all of us." The Phoenix launched into the void, its engines burning bright against the darkness. The swarm loomed ahead, a vast and terrifying presence that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The crew braced themselves as the ship entered the swarm's outer reaches. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into an eternity. Dr. Reyes monitored the payload from the colony, her fingers flying across the controls. "We're in position," she said, activating the Phoenix Initiative. The resonators flared to life, a burst of energy that rippled through the swarm. The nanites were released, a swarm of their own, designed to infiltrate and dismantle the swarm from within. For a moment, nothing happened. And then, the swarm began to react. Its tendrils writhed and twisted, its cohesion faltering. But the swarm was not defenseless. It fought back, its own nanites attacking the invaders. The Phoenix was caught in the crossfire, its hull buckling under the strain. Captain Hale's voice crackled over the comms, his words barely audible over the chaos. "We're taking heavy damage. The swarm is adapting faster than we anticipated." Dr. Reyes hesitated. The Phoenix Initiative was working, but not fast enough. They needed to buy more time. "Increase the signal strength," she said. "It'll overload the resonators, but it might give the nanites the boost they need." Hale didn't hesitate. "Do it." The signal surged, a blinding wave of energy that tore through the swarm. The Phoenix was consumed in the blast, its sacrifice echoing across the galaxy. And then silence. The swarm's advance halted, its tendrils dissolving into nothingness. The nanites had done their job, dismantling the swarm from within. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see if the nightmare was truly over. On the colony, the survivors watched as the stars began to reappear, their light piercing the darkness. The swarm was gone, but so was the Phoenix, and the brave souls who had given their lives to save them all. Humanity had endured, but the cost had been unimaginable. And as the galaxy began to rebuild, one thing became clear. The betrayal had not broken humanity. It had forged them into something stronger, something capable of facing any challenge. The galaxy's downfall had been averted, but the fight was far from over. The galaxy was quiet, a stillness that felt almost unnatural after the chaos of the swarm's rampage. The Phoenix as sacrifice had worked. The swarm was gone, its tendrils dissolved into nothingness, its malevolent presence erased from the stars. But the victory had come at a cost too great to measure. The human colony, once a beacon of hope, was now a somber reminder of the price paid for survival. The loss of the Phoenix and its crew weighed heavily on everyone, their absence a void that could never be filled. Yet, amidst the grief, there was a glimmer of hope. Humanity had endured, and now they had to decide what came next. The revelation of the Zorathians' betrayal had sent shockwaves through the remnants of the Galactic Concord. The once mighty empire was in shambles, its core worlds ravaged by the very weapon they had created. Valen Kor, the architect of the swarm, was dead, consumed by the chaos he had unleashed. The surviving Zorathians, now leaderless and desperate, reached out to the other species, begging for aid, but trust was in short supply. The Concord was fractured, its unity shattered by greed and betrayal. And in the midst of this turmoil, humanity emerged as an unlikely beacon of hope. Dr. Elena Reyes, now the face of humanity's scientific efforts, stood before the remnants of the Concord. Her voice was steady, her words measured. The swarm is gone, but the galaxy is still broken. We can't undo what has been done, but we can choose what happens next. We can rebuild. Together. Her words were met with skepticism at first. The other species had cast humanity aside, betrayed them when they needed unity the most. But humanity's actions spoke louder than words. Despite everything, they had fought to save the galaxy, not out of desire for power or revenge, but because it was the right thing to do. And now, they were offering their help to those who had wronged them. It was a gesture of forgiveness that few could have expected, and it began to shift the tide. The human colonies became hubs of reconstruction, their resources and expertise shared freely with anyone who needed them. The Phoenix Initiative, though born out of desperation, became a symbol of humanity's ingenuity and resilience. The nanotechnology, once a weapon, was repurposed for healing, its self-replicating capabilities used to repair damaged ecosystems and rebuild shattered worlds. Humanity's scientists worked alongside those of other species, sharing knowledge and collaborating on solutions to the galaxy's many problems. It was a slow process, but it was progress. Yet, not everyone was willing to let go of the past. Some species, embittered by the betrayal and the devastation it caused, sought to exploit the chaos for their own gain. Warlords and mercenaries rose to power in the lawless regions of the galaxy, their fleets prey on the weak and vulnerable. The Concord, still reeling from the swarm's destruction, was ill-equipped to handle this new threat. And once again, humanity found themselves on the front lines. Captain Marcus Hale, who had miraculously survived the Phoenix mission, took command of a new fleet, its mission to restore order to the galaxy. The ships were a patchwork of salvage vessels and new designs, their crews a mix of humans and volunteers from other species. It was a far cry from the mighty armadas of the old Concord, but it was enough. Hale's leadership, forged in the fires of the swarm's destruction, inspired those who served under him. "We're not just fighting for humanity," he told his crew. "We're fighting for the galaxy, for everyone who calls it home." The fleet's first target was a warlord known as Krell Theric, whose forces had been terrorizing the outer colonies. The battle was fierce, but Hale's tactics and the fleet's determination turned the tide. Theric's forces were defeated, and the colonies he had oppressed were liberated. It was a small victory, but it was a start. Word of the fleet's success spread, and more species began to rally to their cause. The galaxy, once fractured and divided, began to come together. As the months turned into years, the scars of the swarm's destruction began to heal. New alliances were forged, stronger and more resilient than the old Concord had ever been. Humanity, once an outcast, became a cornerstone of this new order. Their willingness to forgive, to help those who had wronged them, set a precedent for the galaxy's future. It was a future built not on power or dominance, but on cooperation and mutual respect. Dr. Reyes, now a respected leader in the new Concord, stood before a memorial erected in honor of those who had been lost. The names of the Eclipse and Phoenix crews were etched into its surface, a reminder of the sacrifices that had made this future possible. "They gave everything so that we could have this chance," she said, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "We owe it to them to make it count." The galaxy was far from perfect. There were still challenges to face, wounds that would take time to heal. But for the first time in a long time, there was hope. Humanity had risen from the ashes of betrayal and destruction, not as conquerors, but as healers. They had shown the galaxy that even in the darkest of times, there was light, and as the stars burned bright once more, it was clear that the galaxy's downfall had been averted, not by force, but by the unyielding spirit of those who refused to give up. The final line of the memorial read, "They betrayed humanity, and in doing so, they unleashed the galaxy's saviors." It was a testament to humanity's resilience, a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, they had chosen to rise. And as the galaxy looked to the future, it was with the knowledge that they were not alone. Together, they would face whatever came next. Together, they would endure.